My only other question is, under the treaty analysis, should I be looking there for an assessment of the impact on vision and strategy? Because again, it's silent in the assessment, or is that in another brief?
I guess the issue around self-administration is that we're still looking for the self-administrators to undertake the same responsibility as the regional council. Yeah. So the same level of service, there's no difference in what the council would be doing as to what the self-administrators are doing. They're delivering the same service. Yeah. In terms of that. And I guess it becomes an issue or becomes a challenge or an opportunity for land drainage to be part of that by holding them account. So that's helping them with their planning. We can't be silent in it, helping them with their planning, ensuring they're doing a good delivery. And of course, if there is issues between landowners, then all landowners still have the opportunity to come to council. And we've allowed some management hours in that to actually do that.
Final question. Have we got any ability to monitor what it's going to cost these guys going forward? Because I think, I mean, they're doing this because they reckon they can do it cheaper than us, and hopefully they can. It'd be really good to know if that's actually back going forward, because that's just good information we should have, and they should have, and other districts should have.
In reality, they're going to have to justify the level of rating going forward. So if they're doing it for 50% less, then they won't need to rate. So they'll have to bring those accounts forward to show what they're actually spending and the works and so on. So, yeah, the Martingi model and the likes. So I think it's all there, Stu, but it's probably not articulated as well as you may have liked.
I was just to ask, what happens if they change their minds? Is there an ability to go back to being fully rated? Yeah, but you'd have to go back to
Well, I guess that the key issue would be to make sure that the drainage network is kept in good order, so that when you receive an asset back, you would have to look at the re-rating, but our job as part of the council would be to make sure that they're actually doing the work they need to do as well.
I think anyway. I think that there's enough in there to make sure that they have to do that drainage to the standard that we say that we operate under, I suppose is a better way of wording it. And they have to comply to that. And if they don't, there'll be consequences. And I think that's the most important thing. Yeah,
I think the other issue for me is these are competent people.
Yeah,
they're here and now, and the succession planning, as Robbie's mentioned, is really important. But these are engaged, intelligent people. If somebody just arrived on the scene and said, "You guys are costing too much, we want to take it over," we would have to do a lot more due diligence. But these are people that we know and that we reasonably trust. So,
doesn't want to do it. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to acknowledge the work that Reuben has put in behind the scenes on this. I should have mentioned that before. So he's done an outstanding job trying to bring all this together, because it's the first one after the policy. So thanks, Reuben.
Yeah, I'd just at behalf of all the committee, we've only been here for 2 years, and this has been implemented within 2 years, as Tipper has said. So that's one thing we can go to the box and say we've accomplished something. So yeah, thanks, Reuben, for your hard effort. It's I know it's sometimes the conversation is difficult and hard, but you've been respectful through the whole through that, and thanks very much for everything you've done. Cheers. We have a mover and a seconder, and all in favour? Carried. Thanks very much, guys. Done.
Right, so just Mr. Chairman, by way of introduction, I'd like to welcome Bruce, Tracy, and Bruce to our committee table. I guess this has been a topic of conversation for quite a while, particularly around our schemes in terms of the rules that we operate under, and certainly an interest in making sure that we do what we can to best navigate those rules and influence who we can as well. So, so thanks Tracy and Bruce for coming to talk to the committee today, and yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, councillors. Everyone.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take my report as read and happy to take any questions about any aspect of it. Just want to point out one little error that in the report that Councillor Dunbar Smith just alerted us to was in the attachment 1 under the timeframes, where it's got in the freshwater planning process, it's currently got 31 December 24. If you recall, the government changed that date last year to 31 December 2027. So we took this diagram from the MFE website. So 2027 date is the correct date. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I just say thank you, Bruce and Tracy, but I'm more confused now. It's one thing I've, since becoming a councillor, trying to get my head to wrap around all the different plans and what overlaps, and it kind of contradicts itself to the way that I kind of read it, you know, you would to do this. So I still struggle to understand. It's just so complex. I wish it was a lot more easier. It's one aspect on being a councillor that I just yeah, find it, give you credit to the ways that you do it, but yeah, I just.
Tracy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and yes, fully acknowledge that, Councillor Downard. It's our life's work trying to make it easier for people, and we don't ever get there, to be fair. The whole purpose of this report is there's a very active group, as you well know, in the North Waikato who have talked about the prospect of a plan change. It's not easy, and I guess that's one of the messages that you've gleaned yourself from Bruce's report. It's not an easy process, and any plan change that you go into doesn't necessarily guarantee the outcome you're after at the end. I think that's really important. We are in a process. Bruce's team is working with Adam, working with others in ICM to make sure that the provisions that are in the regional plan enable us to do the work we need to do in the most expedient way without giving us any more leeway than we'd give anyone else, but also giving us as much as we possibly can eke out of the system for us. The whole purpose that Bruce put this together is so that you've got a report now that you can direct some of those ratepayers to, so that they can understand. And I say that with a smile, but it was important for us to get this in the public arena.
Thank you, Tracy. I think it'll be more of a debate than for them. They'll bring questions back again, as they do.
Tēnā korua, thank you for the report, and that's been my learning, Michaela, right through council. Just when I thought I understood, there's a policy that trumps it. They but stay surprised, surprisable, I suppose. Is all I can say. But thank you for the report. My question, as you would have heard in the previous debate, absence of policy and probably developer creep, where there's not enough clarity. And in my part of the region, it's the Pōkeno, Te Kauwhata, all those areas bursting at the seams with whatever planning is around them. So I'm wanting to know how does this framework protect those areas, or that their appropriate infrastructure, I guess, is being provided for into the future, or what other planning incentive or disincentive do we have to just assure ourselves? Because Pōkeno is the best example of bad planning, for example. In terms of where it's built, the low-lying areas, all of that stuff that is happening in and around Pōkeno. I know we had a say in it. What am I really asking for? Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if we've got enough rules in place for this period, even if we apply it to the next one that Bruce wants to talk about, to Hamilton. Do our current things take intensification on board and the impact on downstream or upstream catchments?
So the current plan makes sure that what we've got there in place can remain.
Yeah.
but we do need to look at those other situations as to what are the gaps in our current plan and how we need to update it to deal with intensification. Bearing in mind that the plan was written in the late 90s, early 2000s, and there wasn't the level of development that there is now. So it is something that we really do need to look at in the review.
So,
and
and
how-
council, what can we do to enable that review so that we arrive a bit more on time, like, or get ahead of the curve?
Well, my staff need to be aware of the situation, need to make themselves familiar. All the information that we get from yourselves, from our ICM colleagues, are feeding into the review process, and we're using that to develop our revised rule framework for land drainage, flood control activities. So we're working very hard in that respect, and also with our colleagues in the district councils also taking note of what they're saying to us and how they'd like us to respond.
Appreciate that, Bruce.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, just to reiterate, Bruce's team's doing that now.
Yeah.
So that's part of the review process we're going through. Now it's one of the 24 facets to the review that we're going through. Council laws will also be aware that through strategy and policy, we submit on an awful lot of things. A lot of those things are plan changes because ultimately the land use is managed through district plans, through zonings of our TAs, and we are pretty active in that space. It does get to a space where some political calls are made and we deactivate. But, you know, I would suggest that the majority of our appeals that we've had against district councils in the last couple of years have been, is this a wise place to build? What are the implications and what are the ramifications for our own infrastructure? So we're going through the process of fixing the plan, and in the interim, we are doing, I guess, our best with our tools that we've got on our ad hoc basis. In respect to Pōkeno, future-proof and the future-proof development strategy that we've just been through to get that agreement to smarter development is a key kind of anchor tenant in addressing this issue.
Do you think this review will keep us ahead or just on par with development? Because if water and land use, or not so much decoupling, has become an elevated issue of this last 10 years, I would say, of development, then how do we stay ahead of it? Because we're obviously underinvested. If we're this far behind if 1990s is the last time we had substantive policy written. Or is that more an indication of last time we had substantive national policy and the changes that they've been tinkering with? Or
The 1990s, early 2000s, the last time we did a substantial change to these rules in our plan, and we haven't reviewed them since. So it's timely that we're actually reviewing them and trying to get ahead of the game, in my view. But,
And through you, Mr. Chair, it is a process for prioritisation. We had some other things from a policy perspective come up the queue. What it may mean is that we actually earmark this for review every 5 years. It does come at a cost, but every 5 years, so that we're not writing rules that are already obsolete by the time we get to implement them.
Cool. Can I apologise? I just had a call. I just had a fall. Everything's nice. So forgive me if I've missed something. Can I introduce something, and I'm not sure, I've lost my train of thought. Are we able to talk about the permitted activities? Is that sort of a bit out of scope at the moment? It is in the paper?
yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
As you know, you've met with Trevor Simpson and a number of other drainage members who are seeking more permitted activities within the regional plan as it goes through the review.
Yep.
And as an example that we had earlier in here, with the seawall defence over in Karakia, where the stop bank has been made wider to allow for higher elevations over the longer term. And some of the requests, and I think there's a greater understanding now in that landowner group, they are looking for in a permitted activity or the plan that whereas if a stop bank, and this was an example we talked about a couple of days ago, where a stop bank needs to be built up and the base needs to be widened, there's a desire not to have to get another consent to change the base and the likes. They're looking for an ability. It's essentially, in their eyes, like for like or very similar. So if it's a stop bank, it's a stop bank. And if it needs to be raised, why do we need to get a consent to vary the size and shape of it? Unless it's material. And they understand that not everything's just simple. But looking for that flexibility within the plan going forward. So like another example, Churchill East, we had the dam put in place, pumps put in to suck the water out of the same canal, go around the construction site and dump the water back into the same outlet that then fed into the stream and into the river.
Yeah.
So effectively getting a same thing happening, but in a different way,
Yeah.
with no effect on anything. And the consent, I understand, was required. So those are the sort of things that if it's like for like, within, you know, some pragmatism rather than this is just absolutely rock solid, need a consent, end of story,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars, or tens of thousands,
Yeah.
whatever. That's what they're looking for, more so than blanket permitted activity. Got some sort of movement out of the group
Okay.
as to what they're really looking for. So
Yeah.
can we just
Yeah.
have some
Yes, by all means, we can look at those sorts of situations and look at how we update the rules and what we need to do and how we provide for that sort of activity. We've sort of got to comply with the other national bits of legislation, the vision strategy, of course. But we will look at those sorts of things by all means, Councillor.
and looking at, you know, like,
Yeah.
how can we enable this as
Yeah.
opposed to how can we put the brakes on?
Yeah.
As I think, and I'm not suggesting that's reality, but that's the perception. And so if we can, encapsulate that in some
Yeah.
way, that
Okay.
it's
Well, that's sort of,
it's just business as usual, but you know, there's some.
okay, well, if that's what you'd like to see in the plan, that sort of thing, that I can ask the team to investigate and bring back to you as part of the plan review.
I certainly support what the request is, but I
Yeah.
would be happy to ask the committee,
Yeah.
you know, as to whether there's any support for that flexibility within the plan. You know, sometimes you've just got to say no to people, but
Yeah.
there are times when, looking at the Churchill East example of pumping the water,
Yeah.
it didn't make sense.
Yeah, well, that's an option we can consider when we're writing the rules and things like that, and we're in the process of that at the moment. So I'll take that example back to our authors and ask them to sort of look at it.
When will we look at a draft that will come to council to consider before it gets released for whatever? We're in the process. Can we sort of expect to see that regional plan come before us?
Should be, the team are going to be having sort of fairly well-developed drafts by the end of this year. So we could perhaps look at a workshop with you sort of late this year or early next year. And I'll talk to the team about when the next workshop's scheduled and get that put on the agenda if you'd like.
At the moment, it just seems to be in a black hole and you know,
Yeah,
we're going to get there. But
yeah,
when? And I'm just sort of,
Yeah.
that's giving me some confidence.
okay.
Thank you, Noel. Yeah, the other, I suppose I'm devil's advocate here, but the other way we could look at it is how our TAs have gone for catchment consents, like Matamata Piaka has gone for their 3 water assets all as one consent.
Yep.
Maybe we should be the other way of doing it. Instead of having individual consents, we have one consent for catchment, and that is also for construction of replacing assets over that period. And maybe that's another way of looking at it. So I don't disagree with Noel, but I would like a far more efficient and, what was the word you used, Noel? Permissive way of how we do and how we work. So I think both of those could resolve the issue. It's just how we, and I know our TAs are doing that with 3 water assets. So maybe we should be looking at doing with flood protection and drainage as well. So I just put it out there. I think that's we've made a good point, and I'd like to see it,
And
the outcome of both of those.
Okay, and I'll take those back to the team and
Yeah.
get them to consider those
Thank you.
options.
That'd be great, Bruce. Yeah, it'd
yeah,
be
sure.
awesome. Other questions?
If I can just make a comment, Mr. Chair. It is for consideration of the options. They will need to go through the process. I think what is worth mentioning, and something that Bruce always mentions to me, is there's been some recent case law the last couple of years in terms of how permissive people make their plans for themselves. And so there are some guardrails, I guess, in terms of what we can do. But anything that we would be looking put in the plan, we would run through Adam, the team, and Greg to make sure that that level was the kind of level that we're happy with. So
Yeah.
I just think that's important to note.
Is there any other questions? Can we have a mover and a seconder, please? Noel? Michael? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Cheers for your time. Thanks, Tracy and Bruce. Cheers.
All right, Mr. Chair, so we are on page 152 of your agenda, and a bit of an end of year wrap up for the river and catchment management program that we have across the region, before a bit of a focused conversation on the work happening in the Hamilton City area. So we'll welcome our guests shortly, but first we've got Grant and Emily to have a talk about their respective programs.
Kia ora tātou. Afternoon committee, it is just gone afternoon. Yeah, Grant Blackie, I'm the section manager for Waikato and West Coast catchments, and I have Emily here who covers the other half of the region, Karakia Coromandel. We do have a PowerPoint with a few photos for each slide in it, and we do have a bunch of zone managers and other staff online who will talk to those. But just a few sort of comments and summary, I suppose, and I'll pass to Emily. I mean, another massive year in the delivery of catchment and river work. Shovel-ready projects are ramping down. A lot of them have finished, and the remaining ones are finishing in the restoration space this year. But there has been a few things to note this year. It's been an awesome, or the last year, it's been an awesome year for growing grass, and we didn't have droughts and we didn't have too many floods. Well, not over here. And landowner demand in some areas, particularly the Waipa, was down. Maybe partly due to economics of farming, but also the regulatory uncertainty. Waipa was one of the first catchments to be rolled out under the regulations to have farm plans. That's been wound back, of course. But anyway, landowners, it may have been a factor in landowners pulling back a bit from work. We did do a bit of promotional activity, which has been pretty positive in terms of getting landowners to engage around funding opportunities for this year. And so that's sort of put us in a better position in most zones. I would draw your attention to table 2 on, I think it's page 155. It's got the regional outputs. It's not a very interesting table, if you like. It doesn't indicate the level of relationships with landowners, iwi, everybody else, but it does give you a bit of an idea, the scale of work on a few attributes across the different zones. 150k of fencing, almost 1,000 hectares of land retired, over 400,000 native plants, and working with over 300 landowners, or almost 300 landowners. So it's a pretty significant pile of work when you accumulate it up. And table 3, that's the accumulation of 7 years of data for just a few attributes across the zones and the region. And you can see there, 1,600 kilometres of fencing, 4.5 million native plants, almost 8,500 hectares of retired land, which seems incredible. And the almost 2,500 landowners we've worked with. So that number's not actually accurate because there's double counting between years. So if we've worked with a landowner for 3 years, that would actually get counted as 3 landowners. So that number, there should be a note with that table, just advising some caution with that number. The only other thing I'd point out at this point is SEDNet modelling we have done. This was presented to the Environmental Performance Committee. And so all of our work's focused in priority catchments based on science or modelling. And there's been some recent update to the SEDNet modelling, which is one of the models. And we would like to present that, that information to this committee at a future time. But one of the things that pointed out was, you know, things like we can model an 8% reduction in the sediment in the Waipa River due to the work we've undertaken, mainly in the last 10 years. Of course, we can't measure the reductions relating to our work, but we are developing the ability to model them. So that's quite interesting. It does show you how far we have to go, though. If we've reduced it by 8%, got a wee way to go.
Just to support you on that, Grant, each time we've had some water over the pasture, there's a lot less sediment than there was in 98.
Well, there you go. There's a direct measurement from a landowner. So that's excellent to hear. Thanks, Noel. I'll pass to Emily, see if Emily will have some comments about Karakia Coromandel and go from there.
Thanks, Grant. E mihi ana ki te rangi tina koe, e mihi ana ki te whenua tina koe, e mihi ana ki a koutou hui mai nei tina koutou. Kia ora, nice to be here. It's a bit chillier here than it was in Whitianga when we left, but after 6:30, but we'll forgive Hamilton for that. Thanks, Grant, for the intro. For the Karakia Coromandel area, we're really starting to see the results of a new team starting to hit their strides. We had quite a lot of change in the catchment management space in particular. So seeing a real ramping up of the program, and the first time this last year for Waiho and Piako, we were included in the Hill Country Erosion Fund. So a real emphasis on looking at how we can do more with others and how we can partner. Of course, a little bit limited in the Waiho and Piako funding policies in terms of what we can do in the biodiversity space, but certainly looking at where we can add value as opposed to the Coromandel that has in its funding model for catchment new works an opportunity for biodiversity outcomes. So there's some great examples across the zone where we are getting incredible wetland restoration and coastal forest fragment restoration opportunities. I mentioned looking how we can deliver more with others. So that's looking to partner with other funding agencies, how we can bring money in, how we can take our incredible skills at bringing people together and being the, I guess, the knitting needles to sew the fabric of projects together. The focus has been a lot for the Hauraki team on the delivery of 2 of our large shovel-ready restoration projects. That's the Piako Grand Corridor, been a 5-year, the longest running of the shovel-ready restoration projects, and the Upper Waiumu, which was a 4-year project that we've just closed out that some of you missed a wee field trip on, Robbie. So that's, yeah, I guess in terms of connecting with others, a couple I did really want to highlight is the work that we're doing. Our team sit on the advisory panel for the Mātuku, the Bittern Recovery Program. So working with predator-free Karakia Coromandel in an advisory capacity there, connection with the likes of Colville Junction and quite a number of care groups across the areas to look at how we can support, where we can host and co-facilitate field days and those sorts of things. But we'll whip into some slides and just cover off a few projects and highlights from around the region.
Yeah, thank you. If you could go to the next slide, please. And we'll ask Paula actually to come up. So we'll get Paula, who's Central Zone Manager and looks after catchment management in the Lower Waikato as well.
Kia ora koutou. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different. You're going to see plenty of slides about some of the work that's been done in the all the different catchments. But in Central, we've been really kind of looking back at just what we've achieved over the last 10, 15 years. So that slide there, it shows the 2 priority catchments in Central, the Karapiro and the Mongonua. And in the green, and it shows the number of properties we've worked with over time. So yellow in your barely be able to see though, that's pre-2004. The blue properties are from 2004 to 2014. And then the green is from 2014 to now. So you can see in the last 10 years, the amount of work that we've been doing in Central has really ramped up. And then on the right-hand side there is a map that shows the sediment risk, so the sediment erosion risk. So yellow is sort of moderate risk and red is high risk. And the purple are all those properties from the left-hand side. So you can see that mostly we've been working very much in those high risk areas. Also, what we're looking to do this year is really focus in on those areas that we haven't quite captured yet. So I've just kind of rung those in you can sort of see some black ovals on that map. So looking at areas around Te Mero, where we know it's really high risk, but we haven't really, our reach hasn't gone into there yet, around Baker Road, and then right down the bottom of the catchment there near Karakia Road. Next slide. So this are a couple of diagrams that are basically just hot off the press. So of course, there are many landowners who we don't work with who are doing great work on their farms to mitigate sediment and improve water quality. And one way we sort of check about the amount of uptake of all these mitigation practices is through our Catchment Environmental Monitoring Program. And so this was set up recently in the Karakia catchment, and not the summer that's just been, but the summer before. The Inspire leads this work, Tim Norris, went out and surveyed 56 or 57 sites in the Karakia catchment to see how effectively fenced streams are in the catchment. And on the left-hand slide there, on the left-hand side of on the pie diagram, it's showing the blue. It turns out there's about 63% effectively fenced in that catchment of all streams that they surveyed, and which is, I think it's the highest of those catchments that we monitor. So higher than the Matahuru at 52 and higher than the Maokururua at 49%. And the size of the stream, so the figure on the right-hand side there is, along the bottom is the stream order. So 1 is the really tiny streams way up in the catchment, and 5 is basically the Karakia or the Monganua streams, so the really big ones. Waikato would be a stream order of 6. And you can see that on the as you probably expect, the really large streams, there's a really high degree of fencing on those. So some of those catchments, we're getting up to 80 to 90%. Next slide, thanks. So just moving from catchment management, just into river management. So just showing one slide of some of the work that we did this year that's a little bit unusual to what we normally do. So this is a partnership project that we did with Waipa District Council and Ngāti Hoa Mahi Trust. It got started back in about 2015-16. A lot of Waikato River Authority funding went into this project, and it was right down near the in the floodplain just before it hits the Waikato River. There was huge erosion that was basically undercutting that terrace that a lot of that sort of industrial, like the big Mitre 10 sits up on that terrace up there. So a real risk to infrastructure around there. And so extremely weedy, so a real dual focus on trying to control that erosion and then bringing back some of the plant communities that we would expect to see on that floodplain. And so on the left, you can see what it used to be like, although you can't really see the erosion. And then the right-hand side, you can see what we've done. We've brought in those willow cultivars to really stabilise the stream through there, and then really underplanted with natives. Our River Management Officer, James, could see that some of that stuff was starting to open up the plantings, and so worked with Ngāti Taua to go back in there this year and in those holes put in those really long-lived species, so that, you know, just adding to the resilience of that site. So we've put in some totara and some kahikatea into there. Next slide. And then just one other piece of work that we've been doing in Central, so moving away from those rural areas back into the city. We got a company called Hydrobiology to come in and almost kind of give us a framework for how to manage erosion in Hamilton City. And so what they've done is look at how much streams can basically move through our major catchments in Hamilton City, and they've done like a sensitivity ranking. So that's a map on the left-hand side there of the Mongatukutuku. Orange is, I can't read it, but I think it says something like high sensitivity going down to blue, which is low sensitivity. And so surprising for me was to see just how sensitive some of those really upper reaches are in our urban streams. And then right next to the river, where we, of course, with the degradation of the main riverbed, we get real cutting, and that really accelerates erosion at those lower ends. So we're thinking that we could potentially use this work to look at our sort of where Hamilton City is doing their obstruction removal, and sort of gives us a framework for sort of trying to prioritise in those areas that we know are most sensitive to erosion. So that's central. I don't know if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
Drew? Just a question on the earlier slides, the 60-odd% of streams that were fenced. I'm just trying to get my head around that, because it doesn't seem that high, but correct me if I'm wrong, but where I've landed is that's the streams themselves. And I think if I'm reading it correctly, we need to be careful not to interpret that as 60% of all the parts of the catchment that should be fenced and excluded from stock are done so, because it's making sure we don't send out a message that, hey, we've done 60% of what needs to be done in Whitehall, for example, and we're pretty much on the way there, because I don't think we are, and it's probably fairly typical of any catchment in the region. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's right. And those sites are randomly selected.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily sites that we've done work, but across the whole catchment. And then also really good point is if you look at the standard of error on that figure, it's pretty high. It's like 13.1. So it could actually be as low as 50, whatever. The maths are after that. Yeah.
Just making sure we utilise that information in the way, and don't send a signal to people to pick up.
We're all done.
Yeah, because it does read quite well.
Yeah, it does.
And on initial sort of.
Yeah, we were quite excited when we saw it.
I know, yeah, but it certainly doesn't. Someone that's been in Whitehall for 30 years, it doesn't quite feel right. Yeah. Okay, no, thanks. But no, it's good. Yeah.
So just quickly moving on to the lower. So I took over managing the Lower Waikato Catchment Program in January this year. So just been working with the team there. So these slides are just a couple of the projects that we've done this year. I've put two up here, which is quite typical of the type of work that we're doing under our main program, which is Ngā Waikato. It was a shovel-ready project. It's sort of scaled back a little bit, but it's a multi-year project with funding from Waikato River Authority, Hill Country Erosion Funds, which is MPI, and also Crown Infrastructure Partners. So they're funding up to 100% of some of the rivers work. So these ones are some of the catchment management ones. On the left is the Wairinga, so quite a large area that we've done on this site. You can see where we've spot sprayed, getting ready to do some planting. So quite a big area there that's been retired of very steep land, and also put in some poplar poles there. And then the right-hand side is more the riparian work that we're doing, but only on really eroding streams. And that's just showing an area in the Matahuru with some really quite big setbacks to allow those little streams that they really move through that catchment and to move around. And then the next slide. And here's some of the river management work. Again, we're back in the Matahuru and the Wairinga. We had those really big floods last year that came through the Matahuru, and we had huge slips come through. So on those top slides is where one of the slips came across the road, and it really eroded the stream. The stream was really running back up, eroding, and so we put in a big gradient control structure there to sort of halt that erosion. And then you can see a little bit on the side there where the water was running off the road, and we've gone and sort of tried to alleviate some of the erosion that was happening there. And then on the bottom, similar kinds of structures. And I guess the great thing about the Crown Infrastructure Partners funding, where we're now able to go in and fund up to 100% of some of this rivers work, is that we're really able to tackle quite big projects that we weren't able to do before to really make quite a big difference in some of these systems. And I think that's it for lower. Anyone's got any questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Paula. I'm covering for Paul Smith. Paul Smith's the zone manager for Waikato, West Coast and Waipa, but he happens to be in Italy at the moment. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. I won't repeat what Paula has said, but just give you an idea of the scale of some of the projects. So on the left-hand one there, you can see a big area of steep land and a bit of bush remnant that's been retired out in the Karakia Catchment. The HCEF is a Hill Country Erosion Fund project, partly funded by MPI and very active in the West Coast. So that's, fairly typical of the sort of land we're trying to help farmers move out of grazing and into permanent woody vegetation. Native afforestation is using a low-cost native system, so small manuka with a smaller percentage of other natives, but trying to get the cost down, wide-spaced, smaller plants, usually manuka predominantly and a few others. The right-hand one there is more of a large bush retirement, but that one includes, that's the Genge property down by Maricopa. It includes the rare plant Dactylanthus taylori, and we worked in with our biodiversity colleagues in terms of the protection of that area and the use of some of their funding to make it cheaper for the landowner to fence that area off. You just move to the next one, please. River management. So there you have examples of the sort of things we're dealing with. Bank erosion, which, landowners are never going to be able to fix by themselves. And using the CIP money, the Central Infrastructure Projects money, which can fully fund the landowner's share. So we're able to fund our portion, plus using government money to fund the landowner's share to get on and really do some work, which is super helpful for the landowners concerned. You go to the next one, please. And just in the Waipa, some of the left-hand one there is in the Mokurua Catchment, a priority area. It's a fairly large area of native planting. Again, retiring steep slopes down to the stream there. And the right-hand one was the Upper Waipa, working with the Templetons near the Waipa Gorge. A lot of fencing and retirement, 110 hectares of indigenous forest. We've done a massive amount of work in that area, but not so much on this property. So it's good to get that piece of the puzzle tied up as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. This one is a little bit different. This is Waratah Piggery and the Mokurua River by the Piggery or Waratah Farms. We have gauge board there, which kept getting smashed by floods. So come up with an innovative design to put it on an angle and work out the new gradations to read while it's on an angle, so it didn't get so smashed. So that's one of our long-term monitoring sites for the region as well as our local use. Thank you. Next slide, please. And Matakitaki Pa. Kerry's online. I might get Kerry to talk briefly about this because she was involved when she was the Waipa zone manager.
Kia ora koutou. So the Matakitaki Pa site is a really significant site at the convergence of the Waipa and the Mangapiko stream, and there was some significant erosion issues which was of great concern to the iwi, Ngāti Apakura and Ngāti Hakairo. So it's a Waipa district reserve, but at the toe of the Pa site, you can see on the left-hand picture, there was significant erosion and slumping, and it was happening at a really accelerated pace. And so we partnered with both Hakairo and Apakura and with Waipa District Council to do a plan to stabilise that site to prevent further erosion so that access to the Pa was secured. It required a consent from Historic Places Trust, archaeological assessment, which Waipa District covered, and we had a representative of Hakairo on site while doing the works to ensure appropriate practices were in place. So it was a really successful project, and iwi and the District Council really happy with the result and the care that was taken. And you can see from the photo on the right-hand side, a lot more stable now for the access up to the Pa. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. We might come back to questions at the end and just keep running through if that's okay. I'll pass to Deb Nicol, who's the zone manager for Lake Taupo, Upper Waikato. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Are you there, Deb?
Yes, tēnei koto, ko Deborah Nicol tōku ingoa, he zone manager aho o te Waikato Regional Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councillor and staff, and thank you, Grant. Today, I really want to highlight that after an extended vacancy, we finally filled the River Management Officer position. So forgive me, this presentation might be a little bit RiverWorks heavy, but we filled the position with a really competent engineer named Andrew Baddeley. And Andy really hit the ground running and has been very busy in the latter parts of last year. Supported by Hamilton-based river engineer Russell Powell, we completed 2 significant river management works completed in the Lake Taupo zone. So one of these works was the completion of the final stages of erosion control work on the Hungarido Canal. These are the pictures of the Hungarido Canal, and they're part of the Tongariro flood scheme. These works were done under emergency works provisions and included channel clearance, bed preparation, and rock armoring. You can see the coconut mat in that right-hand photo. So after the photo was taken that afternoon, grass seed was spread over and hay mulch, and that's just to protect the exposed area until the grass strikes and it heals. The second important works was on the Tauranga Taupo River, where the river channel
Next slide, please.
This photo is basically works that we do in the upper Waikato with in as far as river management works, mainly including clearing of blockages and logs that might fall in the river that poses flooding or erosion risks. So we do deal with quite large trees that fall in. We have to get, large machinery out. And that's just a part of our works. Next slide, please. Grant Blackie mentioned the promotional material that we're using to circulate to the landowners in targeted catchments in priority areas. So here's an example of a flyer that went out into the Whirinaki catchment. And I'd like to mention that in this past financial year, we had a restoration project in the Whirinaki catchment, and it was called the Whirinaki Restoration Project, Stage 1. We had external WRA funding of over $366,000. So that was extra funding to our Waikato Regional Council funding. So that extra funding came from Waikato Valley Authority, the WRA. That first stage of the project is now completed, and we're moving on to stage 2 in the Whirinaki catchment. So this flyer's gone out to increase awareness and to encourage landowners to contact us with queries and with sites for restoration. Next slide. So I also want to highlight that after several years of a lot of vacancies, we're finally at a full complement in the river and catchment space. See on the right-hand side, there's all of us. But I must acknowledge that the gal at the very left, Nikki Hughes, she's finally left us after 12 or 13 years. She started as a catchment management officer and then went over into the bio team over the last few years. Many of you will know Shorty, as we call her. She's done a lot of great works in the catchment and the bio space. She'll certainly be missed. So I really wanted to acknowledge her contribution today. Thank you. Any questions?
Kia ora, Deborah, and thank you for the report, fulsome report. Probably just feedback on what are we doing about lakeside erosion. This is from mana whenua from at least 3 different parts of the lake. They keep submitting to Taupo District Council activities. They feel that they're getting pushed off and ignored. And talking about the control gate consent that's coming up, what can be achieved there about lake erosion mainly is the
right.
issue they raised with me.
Thank you. Yeah, we've begun discussions with Taupo District Council because they are the lead agency for the Lake Taupo Foreshore Erosion Protection Strategy. I mean, we're there to support them. We have our 45% that we support to their work program, but they do lead it. On September 30th, we're going to be meeting with Taupo District Council staff in the way of Nick Carroll, Greg Hadley, as well as Councillor Sandra Greenslade and our own Councillor Downard, and to discuss that moving forward. They do have a plan in place, and they have done a lot of background investigations of remediation for a lot of the foreshore erosion that's occurring, but they have to go through a long process of getting the permissions to do works. As you well know, that the bed of the lake is owned by Tūwhare Toa, and thus Hapu permissions plus Tūwhare Toa Māori Trust Board permissions are required before any works can occur. So this meeting on the 30th, maybe we can have an update after that, but we'll get a clear understanding of what they're doing, what their plan is moving forward.
Thank you. Happy to support Councillor Downard and his representation of Taupo on that. Probably just want to push into the JMA we have with Tūwhare Toa Trust Board, as well as with the Lakes Collective of Hapu, and what conversations could we support them with, because erosion's been their issue the whole time I've been on council, and we seem to have made no headway. And I guess it's a reality of the whole lake, but there's some areas they are trying to preserve. So I think if we knew what they were, we could perhaps support them in that. But ka waihoki a koe, Mikau, I'll get behind you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks, Tipper, for that. And that's why I've asked for this meeting on the 30th, because it has been an ongoing question since 2007, I think. So, and it tends to get a big magnifying glass on it when we have weather events, but the whole idea is that we need to be proactive and actually see what plan is going forward and what needs to be done to get stuff down, especially down the Kuratau area, which has been ongoing.
Nicola, could I be invited to that meeting? I'm actually sitting in Taupo that day because Kanapanap is on that day as well, so I can't see why I shouldn't be invited to that. Thank you.
Sorry, Rob, that's probably my fault. I organised it. I tried to organise it straight after that meeting because I knew you were going to be there. So I thought you'd come anyway. So.
Yep. Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Yeah,
but,
thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, Deb, for cutting you off when you're going to talk about the Tauranga Taupo River. Sorry about that. I'll pass to Emily to talk about Hauraki Coromandel. So Emily, where you go?
Thanks, Grant. And Deb, totally know the feeling of the joy of finally getting a full team. So feel free to adopt our hashtag humming that we've taken on board for our patch. It's a really great feeling. So next slide, please. And one more. Awesome. So it's been mentioned, CIP, just another TLA, 3-letter acronym for you to get your heads around Crown Investment Partners. So we were quite successful as an organisation across 5 projects. So Waipa, as Grant's touched on, the Waiho, particularly around the Hikataya area, and Coromandel picking up a lovely 3 lots of funding. So our river team for Hauraki and Coromandel have been pretty busy in clean-up mode. You know, it's easy after the last few months to forget the damage that was caused. We even had someone query the other day, did we have a lot of damage? Because they didn't think it was too bad. So I don't know where they were in 2023, but so the focus is, you know, there are a number of our rivers across that sort of Hikataya, Lower Waiho, along that Coromandel range that looked like this. So an area of over 6 kilometres of river channel has been cleared as a result of the river management work through there. And this is pretty typical, big trees requiring a number of skills through not just our own team. So we've got some incredible operators, and I'm sure Adam, you'd puff your chest out over how proud we are over the skills our guys have in Hauraki, particularly around their chainsaw work and how they can operate in an incredibly high risk environment in a way that makes it look safe. And with some awesome digger operators. On to the next one, please. So this is an area at Hikataya where again, a lot of tree fall undermining the bank, threatening assets, and then also causing damage as a result of Cyclone Gabby and her friends, some damage to our stock bank here. So a real team attack in terms of needing to increase capacity in the channel, create some stability and repairs work to the inside bend, and then also having to upgrade. I think that's Kenny striding it out on the stock bank. The next one. Well, the Rivers team were busy in the bottom part of the catchment. They were also pretty busy working in partnership with our catchment management team as part of the Upper Waiumu restoration project. So this is a project we're just in the throes of closing out, but a really exciting example of what can be achieved when we work with our landowners. So might see a media release come out in the next few days. When we first started talking to landowners in this part of the Motu, they said every blade of grass counts. So we were sort of at the time going, gosh, how are we going to get in the ground the 170 odd thousand plants we were hoping to plant? We then ended up with a problem with these guys really getting on board. Best kind of problem to have. We were madly trying to procure additional plants. Through that really important relationship that gets built with our landowners and the way that the teams approach this type of work and having conversations around, hey, when it floods, what does it look like? Where does the river come to? How many times a year are you having to clean debris off your fences or replace them? The landowners are going, okay, actually, I don't get a lot of value out of those blades of grass. Let's take a sensible line and look at where we should position the fences. As a result of that, the team have absolutely smashed, and I'm obviously biased, their delivery around the Upper Waiumu project. So across every metric that we reported to MFE on, they exceeded the targets. So exciting and really enjoyable for me, I guess, because I spend too much time at a desk these days. To go out last week with landowners from Te Hanga South, the Te Hanga North Block, representatives from Raukawa, Bluegrass Farms, and a number of the big players through this catchment, and to hear their stories and experience from dealing with the team, the value of having an EPA, an environmental program agreement, of having a mapped out work program in front of them and how that supports their work. So yeah, if you get the opportunity to head out with our Hauraki team in this neck of the woods, I guess we've been seeing this type of restoration at scale within our Waikato catchments through the support of the work through Tainui and through the Rivers Fund. So this is a bit newer, I suppose, to see this at this kind of scale in Hauraki, and something that we hope to make more of the norm.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. This is another good story that I think, we talked about the biosecurity, the report that was given to us. This is another thing. I've been on a couple of field trips, and it's just amazing what is happening out in the backcountry on some farms, and, what the farmers are doing in collaborations with WRC and the other partners in this. And I think, it's a story that should be told to our ratepayers, because, the work that's and the change. I'm sure even, talking to some of the farmers that have been out there with, just they've got a smile on their face too, that they've seen what's come out of this, and proud on because every farmer is proud on what they do, I'm sure, on their land. But some of these things are unbelievable.
How we make this and grab traction and multiply on it is the most important thing from now on. Fully agree.
Kia ora, Councillor Downer. Thank you for that. And so this will go on social media, and there's a media release set to go out. But it's it's that typical across the boundary fence conversation that then happens with these types of projects. Oh, how come he did, or they were able to? And so we now have Ngā Whenua Rahui on board. They've offered up, I think, close to $400,000 to go into some properties here. So it's that. The momentum that starts to happen with projects like this, so it continues to be a priority catchment.
And amazing thing I heard that when you said fencing, guys, the farmers decided, no, we'll straight line this. We're not going to put bends and angles that cause issues, and we're just going to straight line it and get fences up, and extra area went in, so you needed more planting. So that's amazing.
Yeah, originally we were aiming for a minimum 6 metre setbacks, but I think in quite a number of areas it was in excess of 15 to 20 metres. So a real credit to the landowners and the team. Next slide, please.
Just a question. That's brilliant. Where in a larger program does all this sit? What I'm thinking about is if that's just part of the stream length, is there a plan or an intent to do the whole length of the streams over time? Some parts of it may not need it, but the reality is in isolation, it contributes a little bit, whereas if there was a longer term plan to do a continuation of the longest stretch possible. And I know it's a combination of a whole lot of things, but you can work with the willing to start with, but sometimes, or others will see what's going on and come on board. But is this part of a longer term concept plan that's in place?
So there is 36 properties we work with in total, and if you have a look at the map up on the top of the screen there, it's a loop, so it's pretty much the entirety of the Rapu Rapu and Tukutapere streams and a section of the Waiomu. So partly why this project was picked up is, Adam, probably 8-9 years ago, our team did a whole lot of work around large-scale willow and poplar removal, and the approach at the time was a pretty scorched earth to go in into clear felling. So we picked up that bit of work and have come in and done selective tree felling work. And so in terms of that longer term, Noel, it'll be working with our river management team and where we go next. So we have committed to this part of the catchment, this part of the Waiho catchment, continuing to be our priority catchment for the next 3 years, so that we can continue to build on that momentum. But for the most part, the Tukutapere and the Rapu Rapu are done in their entirety. So that now connects the Kaimais through down to the Waiomu stream. And then we'll continue to work downstream on the Waiomu stream. Next slide, please. So I thought you've seen a few shots today of erosion protection and tree removal. So I thought we'd look a little bit at something a little bit different. And this is a really great example. This is up at Papuaroha on the Coromandel, north of Coromandel town. This is a little stream, and it's one of those classic examples for people like Grant and Adam and I who've maybe been around too long, of sometimes you just have to wait for the landowner to sell. Grant thought I was going to say die. And so we've had, Elaine, who's one of our senior CMOs, has been looking at this property every time she's driven to the northern Coromandel. Huge remnant puriri trees in this catchment, and just landowners who really haven't appreciated the Rauporoa stream. So in the last 18 months to 2 years, both the properties that make up this catchment have sold, and so the team have gone fantastic. There's an opportunity to collaborate between our river management staff and our catchment managers, along with Moiho Ki Te Moana, a group based out of the Colville area, so an awesome community group that we've got a relationship with. And so we're working across the river now to carry out river management work, so erosion protection, gravel removal, looking at some capacity work, and as part of that, some quite significant retirement work. Go to the next slide, please. So this is, Grant and I've talked about, isn't it so much better when we've got photos a few years on? I probably should have put photos up of this in a few years' time, but this is such a great example of when our teams work together on a property. So the river management team have come in, they've done some in-stream capacity work. That landowner is now working with us in Moiho Ki Te Moana to do some really significant setbacks in retirement areas. You can go to the next slide, please. And at the same time, the river management team have been using some of the CIP, the Crown Infrastructure Partners money, to ensure we're doing some erosion protection and capacity work. So this looks a bit raw, but what you're looking at with the larger photo is an overland flow path that's been created. That was already there, but we've just done some further enhancement work. So when the teams hydro-seeded this, they've put in a couple of different species. They've put in a short-lived grass species, and then they've hydro-seeded with some native sedges as well. So this area is part of the area that's retired. And while it looks like pasture at the moment, it'll soon be in sedges and more appropriate species. The photo on the bottom right, when you look upstream, so the one above it is before. This was really typical of this whole stream. It had been grazed with some lovely big herefords for a long time. There was a lot of bank collapse. There was a lot of erosion. This area connects straight into Te Kapo Moana, so high sediment loading straight out of this river during flood. And so you'll see in the bottom right, there's some erosion protection work that has gone on. We've dropped the height of some of the banks to help with that storage and capacity. It looks like not much goes on in that river, but I can tell you with a good bit of Coromandel rain, it comes up pretty quick. So I just thought this was a different sort of example about some of the activities, the way that our river managers are thinking about how we get really good environmental outcomes as well, and partnering with others.
And the location where that is many people going to get to enjoy that in the future. And like that holiday park is well used by a lot of families. Like everyone, I don't know anyone that has a bad story about staying up there. So quite
yeah,
a
and
cool
we've
spot.
got the former Hauraki zone manager just looking across at it. So she's keeping a really close eye on it for us and giving us regular updates as to how work's progressing. Thank you.
That concludes our report. If there are any questions, or we keep moving.
You see, we've got it online that it's all going on social media tomorrow. Yeah, well, so
Thanks, Singer.
okay. It's true.
There's a really good report, thanks, Emily. I was just a comment on the back of the Waimu works. It'd be good to somehow try and promote that right down through the catchment as well, to get those landowners down your end appreciating what on the top end, that's a collective catchment-wide effort, you know.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I'm
The
working hard.
budget in that catchment's not huge.
I know, yeah.
We're already pretty much allocated for Waiho and Piako for catchment new works this year, with a growing level of interest. But yeah, it's a real challenge. We've really had to ramp up. It hasn't gone down well. We've had to say no to some projects because we just can't afford, and they're great projects, worthy of funding, but we're just taking a harder line in terms of our priorities and where we can and can't fund. So take the point, Stu, of needing to promote, but with it potentially comes some unhappy people when we say no.
Tipper, you got a question?
Oh, yeah. Again, thank you for the fulsome report. Nice to know some of the teams are full. Be great when you've got all your teams. Then let us know what we can do about that. Probably, I'm going to lead into something Bruce will ask more about, but it's more for us than the team, is in our recent interaction with the Hamilton City Council, who used to participate in the Central Catchment, I think, am I got it? Central Catchment back in the day, so some years ago. Where do we create the opportunity for their participation now? Not so much at a staff level, but so that their councillors know very well how they're upholding their responsibility because they deliver catchment works. Oh yeah, no, I'm talking into that, but I'm talking out of this into that, hopefully, because it's a catchment managed by us. So A is B, and yeah, that's probably the main one that they asked about. So I'm asking us about that, but in terms of the work being done, how do we keep the gap between us and Hamilton City? Oh yeah, cool, sweet. Yeah.
Bruce.
No, sweet.
Bruce.
Cool.
So it's just something for the future, thinking about the future about reporting. I was very impressed with the planting numbers that provided in the report, 4.5 million plants in one part of the report. West Coast, 14,000 somewhere, 34,000 in Hamilton, whatever it be. But I'm interested in knowing something about the outcome. So we've got output reporting, which is, the process of putting the plant in the ground. So things like survival rates, canopy closure, those sorts of things, they're not for today. We don't have time today, but if I could just signal that would be something I'd like to know about based on what we've seen today. We've been given a whole lot of output. Haven't really been told much about what the consequence of that output was. So,
or the future of what that output looks
yeah,
like.
well, did it work?
Yeah.
Right now, you can look at a photo like the one we just saw, a beautiful photo. Well, clearly something's worked, but what's worked? was full canopy closure achieved in a particular time span? Are there still gaps in existence that are going to be colonised by weeds? Those sorts of things. So that's outcome reporting.
I agree.
Yeah.
And you're asking for what were the species that did well in that catchment?
Yeah, well, just a bit of information about, because you've described extremely well a huge amount of work, but it's all the output. It's not the outcome. Did it reduce sedimentation in the adjoining stream or not? What did it actually do? So that's just something I'd like us to think about for future reporting, really.
Yeah, and just briefly, thanks for that, Councillor Clarkson. So that leads into that topic I talked about bringing back to you next time around the modelling that we can talk about the modelling and that side of it. We can also talk about how we monitor plant survival, which we do as well, and other aspects. So we can bring that back to you.
I've got one. Oh, here. Yes. To Stu's question, is there going to be more done before the Waihau-Piako? I believe so. I've just started that process, and hopefully that's a start of actually having a total catchment idea of where the community and want to go. So hopefully there may be something in writing by the end of the year of their terms of reference, and hopefully we can drive something forward in the future.
Just to qualify, it wasn't so much a question, is there going to be more done? I mean, I appreciate all the financial constraints. It was more about just highlighting the concept of a whole of catchment approach.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
And also, all that mahi is no good if those farmers don't have a good farm plan and they're running farm practices happening as well. So it's a combined to back up all the work that our regional policy, regional plan rules seek to achieve, and farm plans and all that sort of stuff. So it's just it all works in together. That was kind of
that's what I'm trying to achieve by putting this community group together. So hopefully it works. Or it's the start of something to drive forward a vehicle that starts that process. There. Tipper.
Sorry, it was ahead on the last question, and the question I did want to ask you with resilience, and again, crystal ball gazing here, but if we had something in place that would have made us more ready for the events we had in the Coromandel or anywhere else in the region, again, the best laid plans, but are we doing anything different? Because it seems like the same activity to me in the areas. Are we more resilient in the areas that we did hit up against those margins? And I'll give you my example, it's really Port Waikato. That's been disappearing forever. We seem to be on a never-ending circle around that. Car park, the port will do what it's going to do. But we could, if they had the same weather event, we'll end up in the same predicament. There's no new work happening in the area to increase resilience, in my opinion. Again, you might know of other things, but Hatai.
Kia ora, thanks, Tipper. And Rick might want to add to this in terms of resilience, but in terms of the Coromandel example, when we've gone back through and had compared notes to how we coped, and bearing in mind the cyclone went 15 kilometres more to the east than it was going to. So when we had a look at could we have done more, what would we be doing, what could or should we be doing differently, we actually feel pretty comfortable. We have a really good process in terms of if we have a weather event coming, what stream mouths have we checked, what have we got in play. Harking back to the 2004 weather bombs, we built a bunch of community flood schemes. The last of those was the Graham's Creek one at Tairua. Our real at-risk areas, we've carried out a lot of work. What the CIP money has been allowing us to do is we haven't been able to do river management at scale. Areas like the Coromandel aren't big flood protection schemes. We rely a lot on our river management activity, which then relies on our landowners to have often a 50% contribution to that work. This money through central government is allowing us to fund work at 100%. And often that work is dealing with really historical things that were well-intended work under the catchment board. So lots of planting willow and poplar. They're really expensive to go and remove and dispose of now. So that's what the team are doing with this money, is going, okay, what can we do to support the resilience of those catchments to allow the streams to have room, but also for the water to get away as quickly as we can. Chloe, the Coromandel Zone Manager, is also sitting on a forum with TCDC and with Civil Defence and looking at what we can do more of together. Because the team, I think that was probably one of the real differences through this last year, was how often our team and our contractors and then our comprehensive consents were drawn on to be able to undertake work and do it at pace. But short, sharp catchments, there's only ever going to be so much we can do on the Coromandel. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd just like to thank you all for your report. It's a pretty good report. Lots of great outcomes, a lot of fencing, a lot of plantings. And it shows that there is a willingness for the community, farmers and all other stakeholders to participate in doing some great outcomes. So I think we have to take that and we just have to multiply it to get the outcome we want in the future. I know that's hard. I know we're not going to get everything we want, but we've got to do what we can. So thanks a lot, you both, for all your hard efforts, because it's a lot of effort you put into this. Thanks very much. Cool. All in favour? Carried. One.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a bit of a different lens across our river and catchment program, which is work that we do with Hamilton City Council around our memorandum of understanding under Project Watershed. So I'd like to welcome Fiona Hutton to the table. Thanks for joining us today. It's a really cool partnership that we have with Hamilton City in terms of delivering the work, which is basically, so Paul will outline, give some context to the discussion, then Fiona provide a bit of an insight into what's happening in our urban space.
Great, thanks, Greg. I'm just going to quickly whip through some slides just to give you that context. Next one. So I don't think we've really brought the service level agreement Project Watershed to this committee in this current term, so we thought it was a really good opportunity just to let you know what's been happening. So just a little bit of background. So both councils share some very similar objectives for river management and flood protection in Hamilton City. And when we developed Project Watershed way back and came into effect in 2002, we realised that because they align so well with what Hamilton City was doing, that we could set up the service level agreement to fund the work that we would normally do that they were already doing. So that's kind of how it came about. Next slide, please. So there's basically three main objectives under the service level agreement. So we're trying to ensure river and stream capacity within the, there's basically all the major stream catchments, the ones that arise outside of the city are the ones that the service level agreement covers. So looking at stream capacity, bank stability and protection activities, so obstruction removal, trying to protect some assets and making sure that we're planting, stabilising vegetation through those catchments. And we also do, Hamilton City under the agreement also does quite a bit of reactive erosion control as well. Next slide. So just the kind of the mechanics of the way it works, there's a 10-year plan under the agreement that is aligned with the LTP. So we're just working through that at the moment, given that we've just got a new LTP. So on the right-hand side there, I've just put up basically how much funding is for each year of the LTP. So under the last LTP, the council agreed to approximately a $50,000 increase each year of the LTP. So you'll see that reflected there with a bit of adjustment for inflation. And that stops that increase I think in 2031 is when that 10-year period from the last LTP stops. Then we have an annual works program that talks to the 10-year plan. So that's where we get a bit more detail from Hamilton City about what they're going to do under the agreement each year. They report quarterly to us and about the works that they've done. We also meet quarterly just to discuss any issues that have come up or any opportunities to work together. And then in that meeting, that also gives us the opportunity to adjust the annual works program if we need to, particularly for things like reactive erosion where certain things happen and we need to, they've got projects that they're really keen to get done.
Can I just ask a question on that budget, or do you want to do it at the end? One of the concerns in the greater region, and particularly Lower Waikato, which the city feeds into, is the issue of costs. And to hear you say that we just bang 50,000 on, it doesn't seem to have a lot of rationale behind that. And just adding costs 50,000 a year seems to be a license to print money. And I'm basically using the words of my constituents in the north or Lower Waikato. So is there some science behind that 50,000, or is it just let's pluck a figure out of it and let's just carry on? Yet residents have got the same concern as we have as in the rural area.
So I don't have the background between the quantum of the increase. I guess it recognises that the cost of doing this work does increase from year to year, and so we need to look at maintaining that level of service that is described in the Memorandum of Understanding. And it was an agreement that was put in place in the previous LTP. So I guess the challenge is that if we were to not respond to those increasing costs, we'd see a reduction in the level of service being able to be provided to the city. The actual funding, now I don't have the funding mix to hand, but this is brought in through Central Waikato Zone, if I'm correct, and largely. So it's funded from, largely the city, with some, obviously, a slightly bigger area between Karapiro and Taupiri in terms of the wider zone. Also, probably Ngāruawāhia.
Look, I appreciate your comments, Greg, but the reality is just because somebody in a previous triennium said, let's do this, does anywhere along the way say, is it still viable and the right thing to be doing is just adding 50,000 and don't worry about it, and because over 10 years, that's 5 million, isn't it? 500,000. $500,000 in 10 years, and then I accept that there are cost increases, but just to add infinitum, add 50,000 every year and don't do any checks and validating it, we're going to get questioned a lot harder, and maybe it's less visible within the city, but I can assure you it's something that we need to look at. It's just not, I'm not prepared to just go rubber stamping automatic 50,000 increases.
And I think we had a joined up governance discussion with Hamilton City Council recently, and there's certainly a real interest from Mayor Paul and councillors in terms of getting a little bit more involved in the how we work together. And part of that is actually agreeing, in terms of the work that needs to be done, what is actually the rate take that's required to support that. So it's a potential for a bit of a collaborative effort.
And in my former life, I was part of the Waikato District Hamilton mayoral group that met regularly, and only those Hamilton members are involved in that with this council, but I just question that as well. So taking away people that have knowledge of and working with these issues. So anyway, that's an internal issue for us to worry about.
Okay. Next slide, please. So just some of the benefits of under the agreement. While working in the service level agreement, it also allows us to develop really good relationships. So we're basically end up working on multiple projects outside of it as well. We use the technical expertise of both councils. On the right, there are some of the gradient control structures that we have done in the Kirikiriroa. On the left is one that we've done. And it's something that Hamilton City came along and saw us doing, and then they basically replicated it other areas where this stream was degrading. And on the right-hand side, that was quite a big project that was going into the Waikato River under the near Puketi, on the Puketi Bridge there, where our river management officers provided most of the technical expertise for that project. Because quite often when these big projects go out to, I'm not sure if I should say, to consultants, they often go for the really hard engineered approach. Whereas we're normally looking first to a much softer approach, which costs a lot less. And so for that one, we provided the technical expertise. We oversaw all of the work, and it came in probably way under what would normally have occurred in that situation. And then working together like that just basically builds the capability of both councils. Next one. And just a few more things that we've been able to do together. And I kind of cover it in my item there. I guess the other thing is we can help each other with contract engagement, looking at best practice in these river systems. We do quite a lot of sort of co-benefit work, so looking for ecological enhancements as we're doing the river structures through the city. We do a lot of run, riffle, pool work to increase fish habitat, and able to better manage landowner queries when they come in. So sometimes they're for us and sometimes they're for Hamilton City, and we're able to kind of accelerate that a lot better, knowing which channels to go through. And then just quickly, the last slide before I turn over to Fiona to talk about the annual report. This is just a project that we did at Saxby Road in the Mongatukutuku, one that Hamilton City was doing to remediate, although there's a lot of erosion downstream, and we tapped into our scientists, our fish scientists here, to look as we're addressing the erosion, can we also address the fish passage issue here? And you can see on the left, there was a really big drop off, and then we came in, designed something that allowed us to overcome that. And then on the right hand side, you can see what quite an improvement that was made. Right. And now Fiona's going to talk about what they did this year last year under the service level agreement.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. My name and fellow councillors, my name is Fiona Sutton. I'm the Head of Operations and Process for Three Waters for Hamilton City Council, and really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about the great work that we get to do together with Waikato Regional Council under Project Watershed. So first slide, please. So Project Watershed work is undertaken by two main teams within Hamilton City Council, our parks team, and then also our Three Waters team. So I'm going to be speaking on behalf of both of our teams today. So I apologise if I don't have all of the details in advance about some of the work that our amazing colleagues in parks undertake, but just a bit of a high level about our stream maintenance and inspections. So there's some figures there about the number of streams, inspections and blockages that we've cleaned. There's some more details about that in the report, but in the last financial year, 23-24, 214 stream inspections, 177 blockages cleared, and 7 vegetation areas cleared. The team that do this work are very, very passionate about the work that they do, and we have really good routines in place for when we've got rain and weather coming, that we're going to check. We go and check all the relevant areas that we know can potentially have issues in the city to minimise the impact of weather events, and so that proves to be reasonably successful for us, and I hear that you all do the same thing, so that's really good. Works together. Next slide, please. So these are some pictures of some of the blockages that have been cleared in the Mangakōtukutuku in the last 12 months. So some very helpful landowners there with tyres and that sort of thing. That's quite common in our urban stream environments, but the team are doing a good job to clear those blockages to minimise the impacts of erosion and after weather events. Next slide, please. So this is some amazing work undertaken by our Parks team and is co-funded by Project Watershed and Hamilton City Council. So this is part of our Nature in the City program. There's some really good work that's undertaken here in the top, AJ Sealy Gully, down in the bottom there, that's the Mangaputukutuku. Lots of hours of volunteer hours, 2,500 volunteering hours each year, 11 regular groups, 17 schools undergoing education restoration work in our gullies. So pest education, weeding, planting, all of that really, really good stuff that improves the quality and also is a really good way of educating and bringing people on board to understand just how important these areas of our city are. Next slide, please. So also work with individual private residents. So there is a half a FTE focus on private resident restoration now with our Nature in the City program. These pictures, one of them is from the Kirikiriroa Gully and the other from Mangaputukutuku. There are 182 residents working with Hamilton City to look at working towards restoring the gullies that they own or back onto. They're supported with advice from staff at Hamilton, and then the plants are funded by Project Watershed. So of those 182, 111 back onto Hamilton streams, and then we've got 17 hectares of gully system that's currently under restoration. Next slide, please. So maintenance of gullies, this is our parks team again, pest control, planting preparation, 20,000 native plants planted each year. So this program of work is partially funded by Project Watershed and the rest from Hamilton City under our Nature in the City program of works. Next slide. And then we've got some erosion control work. So I've just put a little map in there to show kind of a little bit of a higher level. So this is Mangaputukutuku stream, two pieces of work that were undertaken in the last financial year to stabilise bank and support with erosion control. Yeah, that's me. Is there any questions? There's more detail in the report at the end. These reports go, I think, to our councillors. So we share these reports with our Hamilton City councillors every quarter before, and then they're also shared with you. Paula and I have a really, really good working relationship, and we have a good working relationship with our teams on the ground between HCC and Waikato Regional. So we're really grateful for the funding and the technical support that we get, and we're really glad of our relationship. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Oh, no, look, thank you. Look, I thought I'd jump in because I've got to get going, but really good report, thank you. Bit of a wider generic question. I haven't been close to it, but I'm thoroughly confused. I'm picking up from the grapevine that the Hamilton councillors are still feeling a bit grumpy about not having an active part of all this. And to hear that you're reporting to them regularly, I'm really confused as to what the issue is, because it's kind of like the HCC councillors think there's something extra magic's going to come out of some extra committee. I don't get it, but someone needs to, Noel and Robbie, you need to sit down with Paula and try and nut this out. It's a really good report. You're giving really good reports to your councillors. What's the problem here?
They had the meeting the other day. Nor Noel or myself was invited.
Yeah.
It was only Chris Hughes and the Hamilton councillors. We weren't invited to the.
Yeah, but I'm a Hamilton councillor.
Yes, I appreciate it. So I touched on the exclusion of people who have a little bit of background in something.
That's right.
And there's no reason why we couldn't bring in additional, like Robbie or I, or both, for particular issues.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
It's not like the conversation has happened before. I had the same conversation when I was chair with Paula, and it's like it's gone nowhere, It's going on now.
Need to look at
Governance. So just on that, great report. I think needless to say, management, you fellas are all over this. It's the upstairs conversation, as Councillor Leebones talked about. But in terms of the upstairs conversation, what I want to know is there a target? Are we greening Hamilton, or are we just maintaining the current standard of thing? If you see cities overseas, they're opening up their watersheds, doing all this other work. I don't know what the target is. And again, it matters because this is our biggest metropolitan area, Meki. So that's one question. What's our target? And two, how do we keep each other, have this governor to governor conversation about that target? Because it's either in our LTP or in their LTP, right? And that's the haggle space, I think, Stu, that they're looking for. Yeah. Whether it's in our LTP or their LTP in terms of delivering whatever this green space is. So I want to take that off staff because don't comment on that because, you know, we're duly elected to be who we are. But in terms of your ability to do the job we've asked you to do and create the green space that we're imagining as both councils, come over to you. Thank you.
Kia ora. So in response to that question, we have a Nature in the City program, which has quite audacious goals for increasing native vegetation cover through the city. I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I do know that that is a program of work that is partially funded by Project Watershed, but also is funded by Hamilton City Council rates. So there is information on that, and I can include some information on that in our next quarterly report if there is interest.
Well, I was at the meeting, so I better say something. So, yeah, I think, though, this is simple communication because this is the first time I've seen the Project Watershed report, and I'm a newcomer, so I may have missed it, but I've now been in action here for over 2 years, and I've just seen a Project Watershed report. So it works both ways. It works both ways. The Nature in the City program, I'm fully over, but that's because I have independently been involved in the Nature in the City program, and I know what's going on. And that's, I guess, the issue for me is the overlap and the getting the best possible results by the partnership. And I'm only talking about the regional council and the city council. I'm talking about the other partnerships out there that also need to be involved. So, for example, one question I would have is that amazing looking hydrological report that Paula, I think, showed, and the amazing Project Watershed report, are those being shared with, for example, the Waikato Biodiversity Forum, with the community groups who are running gully restoration projects around Hamilton City, and with organisations, for like like Go Eco? This is the other aspect of spreading this information way more widely. And then my other comment would be while I like the report, again, I've got the same issue that I had with the previous report. The report is about outputs. It is not addressing outcomes. It's talking about how many times people have gone and done something. It's talking about how many plants they planted, but it is not talking about what difference this work is making either to watershed management or to biodiversity. It's not actually hitting the issue and reporting the stuff you would need to know whether you were making progress. Now, I do know that in the background, Hamilton City, through the Nature in the City program, is in the process of setting up a fully scientific monitoring program, which I'm assuming will be somehow interlinked with Project Watershed, because it needs to be. And I also know that the figures are roughly along the lines of approximately 2% of the Hamilton City footprint has vegetation which is dominated by native species in existence, and the target that they're trying to achieve is 10% by 2050. So there is a target and there is a plan, but we've never heard about it. And today we've heard, for me, It was the first time I've seen a project watershed report. Now, I went to the meeting with the mayor and the other councillors the other day, and my general impression is simply it's about this sort of information not getting to the right people, not being passed around widely enough so that people actually even know what's going on in the city that they live in. So I'm jumping the gun, but does the project watershed report get shared with the community, or is it for a council committee and it goes to the council and then the councillors might read it, but
That's the
no one else even knows, right?
No. Does anyone want to add to that? Yeah.
That's what I wanted.
Sorry, it's been going for 22 years. Does it need, I don't know what the forward projection is and where they want to go. And that's the main thing, do we need to review that or, with Hamilton City Council? But yeah, it's time for now after 22 years. And a lot of the funding's actually going into erosion and maintenance of stream things. So, it might not carry on into going into stuff that we want to, as a city grow, as Tipper said, into being a flourishing, vibrant green city.
So dare I mention it? I will make my final comment. Dare I mention it? What we actually need is a cross-council workshop on Project Watershed, which actually starts to address some of these issues and make sure that everybody's in the room. The main point I wanted to make, though, and I should have said it at the beginning, I'm sorry for you guys that this was right at the end of an agenda, the very last item on the agenda, and we have essentially run out of time. So some of us are being a bit fast because we need to shoot out the door shortly. We need to do this thing justice. And actually, that is what is missing at the moment, doing justice for what is a really important project between the city and the regional council, and one which clearly could do with way better communication.
Adam's writing that down as an action right now. So
Can I just jump in there on the communications? One of the underlying things that's come through this meeting and right throughout the different agenda items is the communication and telling the story. And I see Inga is still there, so hopefully she hasn't disappeared and left the screen on. But the reality is our comms needs to be better with our community and telling these positive stories. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, Inga. I'm just saying that we need to be better at telling the story and getting it out there. And as you say, it's the first time I've heard certain things. Can I just turn it back to the presenters? Thank you very much. I've sat here all day and watched you looking and waiting for this presentation. I think it is also incumbent on us to look at how this committee does justice to biosecurity, biodiversity and the likes. And I think looking to the next triennium, whether how we deal with biodiversity, biosecurity, are we doing it properly? So it's open. It still opens a bigger issue for me within this council is how we are managing certain things. And while it's all interlinked, and so which committee or committees do you put it within? We shouldn't be sitting here as we do and hearing some amazing things. We're not giving it the priorities or the airspace I think that we should do. So that's for us internally to review.
Yep.
But I think first and foremost, we need to look at our comms and how we tell the story, because I don't think we're getting the good news out there. We hear the bad news all the time because that's really easy to sell in newspapers, but the good news we need to get out there. So thank you, and thank you to the presenters.
If I could, just before you close us off, Robbie, suggest that perhaps we've had great models today of how contested, very contentious issues in catchment have been resolved by smaller meetings by our chairs and a work program that I think we've got to have the same approach with Hamilton. Bruce, potentially the Hamilton councillors should convene the meeting and we all attend as catchment because they've got other issues, besides catchment. And invite them over here. I think the councillor named was Maxine Van Oosten. as long as she's in the room, then we can move this issue on before the next ICM. But I think it is your guys' mandate. I mean, I'm a Hamilton thing too, but to call them into a forum with us, because this is one of their many issues with us. It's not their only one. Public transport is an agenda. And what was the other big one in the room? It's PT, this one. I think those are the big ones, eh? And maybe a little bit of te waka
Development.
touristy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but rather than have Hamilton City come through us 3 times, why don't you convene the meeting and let our catchment chairs attend the part that affects catchment? That would be my firm recommendation, and I'm happy to attend for the Ngā Haue Whā constituency too, but I'd really back you in doing that because it'll move it an inch before the next meeting. And again, to you, Michael, you got all my support for the Taupo one too, mate.
Like,
Yeah, just to follow on from this, you know, if there's anything else maybe that Greg and Adam might be able to give us information on that we're a partner, like this is the first time I've seen this. What else in ICM comes out that we're partnerships in our region wide that, you know, because I didn't know anything about this until that day and I've been on the committee for 2 years. And this has been going for 22 years.
yeah, agree. Yeah, Adam, yourself and Greg go back and put a bit of lens over the whole of what our other things that we're supposed to be looking at within this committee. Most probably has been valuably looked at today that we've been dealing with flood protection and all that, but there's things that are going past to the keeper all the time that we're not getting a lens over. If that's I know that's a crude way of saying it, but it's pretty much how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll take a note of that, and I'll work with Greg on just what that might look like. And remembering this is just only project watershed. There's other funding policies and other things around the place too, and we try and report those up to council where we can. But happy to take a look at that and see where that lands. But I guess it just comes down to priorities and just making sure that we're presenting things at the council table. You guys need to know. But anyway, I'll leave it to Greg and we'll come back. Yep.
I don't want to see this as a criticism of staff, but we need to know everything that we don't need to be kept in the dark. And I'm not sure that you were trying to say that, but when you say what you need to know, but we need to know as much as we need to know so that we can give guidance where appropriate. We don't want to cross into operational, but we're still here's something today that we've all said, well, we've been here 2 years. First time we've heard about something.
I think we want to know where we collaboratively work with others. That's what we want to know, and how we can make that work better. Yeah, yep, the beast moving past it. I would have known nothing about this, and I'm the chair, and because my daughter, I'm a councillor from Waihau, so Eastern Waikato over the other side. But my daughter is a pupil at Dio, so they planted up a gully there for the last 3 years. So she's participated in that. Otherwise, I would have known nothing about it either. But I know she's teacher only days and some of those things. They've been out planting and bringing gumboots to school and work clothing. So thank you for all the efforts, and my child has participated in that, so that's great. Thank you. All in favour? Against? Carried. Paper. Rick, you've got the whole. It's funny because our daughters are in the same soccer team at Dio, so every Saturday for the last thanks Bruce, for the last 4 months I normally see Rick out there reffing the soccer field on a Saturday.
Right, thanks, Robbie. Yeah, kia ora koutou, Rick Lifting, toko ingoa. Look, I don't have any slides prepared, and happy to take any questions. Take the report as being read and here to answer any questions. Thanks.
Yeah. All in favour? Against? Carried. Sorry for you sitting there all day, Rick.
I know, I've enjoyed listening in. It's been great. Thank you.
Are you participating in the next Karakia?
Oh, the adaptation plan?
Adaptation plan meeting?
Yeah. I think I
Okay,
am.
cool. We'll be seeing you there anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, because that's this month or next month, sometime soon.
Soon, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You want to, Karakia, Adam?
Unahia, mai te ruru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te henenaro, e te ara, takaturu, ko rā e rongo, e whakarira, ake ki ranga, kia tēnā, tēnā huie, tai ki e.
Thanks for all your attendance and thanks for all the staff. Thanks for today. Meeting closed at 38. Thank you.